Hello and welcome back everybody. In this video we're going to talk about the unit circle, and we're going to figure out an easy method to memorize the unit circle. As you may know, the unit circle is divided into, you can divide it into 12 sections, or you can divide it into 9 sections. It really does depend on what you're looking for, but in this video we're going to look at a unit circle where each section or each quadrant is divided into 4 parts. So there are 3 lines, for instance, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3 in each quadrant. But before I begin, I'd like to label my graph. I like to label what I know already, just so that I can avoid it in the future. So here I have 0. At the top I have 90 degrees, which is pi over 2. And then on the left I have pi. And then at the bottom I have 3 pi over 2, which is 270 degrees. Now I'm going to use a different color here. The way I like to do this is that I like to focus on 3 main angles first. That is the 30-degree angle, the 45-degree angle, and the 60-degree angle. They all lie between, in the first quadrant, between 0 degrees and pi over 2. So for pi over 6, which is 30 degrees, it should lie somewhere here. If 30 degrees is here, 45 has to be here, 60 has to be somewhere here. Of course, this is a very rough sketch. So let's begin by writing pi over 6, which stands for 30 degrees. Then we have pi over 4, which stands for 45 degrees. Then we have pi over 3, which stands for 60 degrees. And we all know that the unit circle has a radius of 1. So I'm going to go ahead and connect this line to pi over 3. And then I'm going to connect another line to pi over 4. Then I'm going to connect one more line to pi over 6. Now to find the corresponding ordered pairs for each of these angles, one thing you can do is that hopefully I can fit everything in here. One thing you can do is that you can number out the ordered pairs. For instance, for the y coordinates, we can start with 3, 2, and 1. And then for the x coordinates, we go 3, 2, and 1. Now what you do is you divide everything by 2. Go ahead and divide everything by 2. And then you're going to square root the numerator, each numerator. For here, for here you don't have to do that, but for the 3, you should. For the 2s, for the 3, and you can ignore the 1 right here. Now, moving on to the next quadrant, one thing I like to do is that I like to kind of like number off, or like kind of make an estimation as to, or on where the next angle would lie in quadrant 2. For instance, we have pi over 3 here. Then we have pi. If we add pi over 3 to pi over 3, we're going to get 2 pi over 3, which obviously is somewhere here. And if we add another pi over 3, it would end up being 3 pi over 3, which is just pi. So we can make another line right here. We can call this 2 pi over 3. And I'm going to make another line right here. And I'm going to do one more line right here, because remember we said each quadrant is divided into 4 sections. Now, for pi over 4, if I add another pi over 4, this is going to give me pi over 2, which is already written here. Now, if I add another pi over 4, so pi over 4 plus pi over 4 plus pi over 4, that's going to give me 3 pi over 4. And if I add another pi over 4, that's going to give me 4 pi over 4, which is just pi. So here we have 4 pi, we have 3 pi over 4. Now this is going to get a little bit messy, but I'll try to be as neat as I can with my writing. Now we have pi over 6. If I add one more pi over 6, I'm going to get 2 pi over 6, which is pi over 3. And then one more pi over 6 will give me 3 pi over 6, which is pi over 2. One more pi over 6 is going to give me 4 pi over 6. 4 pi over 6, yes, I'm right. Another pi over 6 is going to give me 5 pi over 6. And then one more pi over 6 is going to give me 6 pi over 6. So 5 pi over 6 has to lie somewhere here. And that's 5 pi over 6. Now I'm making some space because we're going to end up writing the corresponding ordered pairs to each of these angles. Now what you can do is you can just copy these and write them down here. However, you have to be aware of the sign. For instance, so here we have radical 3 over 2 and 1 over 2. So you can go ahead and take this and just write it here. So it'll be radical 3 over 2 and then half. And notice how we're on the left side of the x-axis. However, we're in the positive side of the y-axis. So we're going to put a negative sign right here. For 3 pi over 4 is the same thing. If you look at pi over 4, we have radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. So it's the same ordered pair, radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. However, the x is negative in this case because we're in the negative side of the coordinate system. However, we're in the positive side of the y-axis. For 2 pi over 3 is the same as pi over 3. We're going to take half and radical 3 over 2. We're going to write it here. However, we're going to write our negative in front of the half, indicating that this is a negative x value, since it's on the left side of the coordinate system. And we have our 3 over 2. Now, what we can do here is that we can just keep on extending those lines. So if I extended this line, this is going to go somewhere here. And if I extended this middle line, it's going to continue on going through the middle. And if I extended this line, it's going to end up pretty close to the negative x-axis. And I can go on, of course, and do the same thing here in quadrant 4. Excuse my sloppiness. So for this angle, the way to determine it is that, well, since we extended the line, we know that to go around the full circle, you're going to have to go 2 pi radians. However, if you're going only half the circle, and if you're starting at pi over 6, so all you got to do is just add pi. So pi over 6 plus pi is 6 pi over 6, and that's going to give us 7 pi over 6. Therefore, this angle right here has to be 7 pi over 6. looking at the ordered pair is exactly the same. However, since we're in the negative side of the x-axis and in the negative side of the y-axis, we're going to have to change the sign of both values. So we have negative radical 3 over 2 and negative half. For pi over 4, if we add pi, we're going to end up with pi over 4 plus 4 pi over 4. It's going to give us 5 pi over 4. So here is 5 pi over 4. Looking at the corresponding ordered pair, we have radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. Let's not forget our negatives here. We have negative radical 2 over 2 and negative radical 2 over 2. Let me move this just a little bit to make enough space. Here we have pi over 3 on the other side. If we add pi, we're going to get pi over 3 plus 3 pi over 3. That's going to give us 4 pi over 3. So this is 4 pi over 3. The corresponding ordered pair is half and radical 3 radical 3 over 2. Both negatives. Let's not forget those. Now we have our 3 pi over 2 as our negative y-axis, excuse me. Here we have 2 pi over 3. If we add a pi, so 2 pi over 3 plus 3 pi over 3, this is going to give us 5 pi over 3. So we have 5 pi over 3. The corresponding ordered pair is half and root 3 over 2. Positive x-axis, negative x-axis, negative y-axis. I can erase this since I don't need this anymore. On this line, we have 3 pi over 4. If you add pi, you're going to get 7 pi over 4. The corresponding ordered pair is negative radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. So radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. However, the x stays positive, the y is negative. For our final line here, we have 5 pi over 6, and if you add pi, you're going to get 11 pi over 6. Corresponding ordered pair is radical 3 over 2 and half. Let's not forget the negative. So this is kind of messy. However, this is my version of figuring out all the points on the unit circle. Of course, you don't have to commit this to memory. This is why we're practicing how to do it. However, in later videos, I'll try to explain another method I use to determine the angles or the answers to corresponding angles, to the corresponding 3 trigonometric angles that are cosine, sine, and tangent. And then really, if you know all these 3, you can easily figure out the other remaining 3. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions or concerns, and we'll see you in the next video.